Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unlocking the secrets of photosynthesis. We are diving right into the fascinating microscopic mechanics that literally sustain all life on Earth. Think about it. We walk past plants every single day. We put them in our living rooms, we eat them for dinner. But how often do we actually stop to appreciate the incredible chemical engineering happening right inside their leaves? Today, we're going to unpack that exact process.
Here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll start with the great plant mystery. Check out nature's ultimate factory and uncover the secret green ingredient. Then we'll break down the photosynthesis recipe, look at sugar, starch, and storage, and finally zoom all the way out to the circle of life.
Part 1. The Great Plant Mystery. So where does mass actually come from? Let's kick off our investigation with a question that honestly trips up a ton of adults.
When you're standing next to a massive, towering oak tree or a giant redwood, you really got to ask yourself, where does all that heavy, solid wood actually come from? Think about the sheer tonnage of the bark and the leaves. How does a tiny little seed turn into a multi-ton giant?
Well, it's super common to think plants just kind of eat the dirt they grow in. But actually, that's a total myth. Sure, soil gives them a few essential nutrients like nitrogen and potassium, but that's just a tiny fraction of their total weight. The crazy truth, plants pull their mass literally out of thin air. Scientists prove this with a brilliantly simple experiment. If you take two identical plants and seal one inside a clear plastic bag so it can't get carbon dioxide from the air, that sealed plant barely gains any weight compared to the normal one, even if they get the exact same sunlight and water. So yeah, trees are quite literally built from the air. Moving on to part 2, nature's ultimate factory. Since plants aren't eating the soil, they've got to manufacture their own building materials. In biology, we call plants autotrophs. Breaking that down, auto means self and troph means food. Basically, they're entirely self-feeding. Unlike us animals, we're heterotrophs, constantly having to hunt or forage for energy. Plants just chill there and run their own internal manufacturing plants.
And the name of that specific manufacturing process is photosynthesis. Again, looking at the root words here, photo literally means light and synthesis is putting things together. So they're grabbing energy from light to stitch simple chemical blocks together into complex, energy-rich food.
To really understand this assembly line, we can use the Great Hearts Educational Framework. It's fantastic because it breaks down these complex, microscopic concepts into highly logical, easy-to-follow steps. It's just like tracking an actual factory assembly line.
All right, part 3. The secret green ingredient. We need to figure out what machinery actually drives the factory and makes this whole operation possible. To understand the machinery, we first have to answer a super simple question, one you probably asked when you were 5 years old. Why are leaves mostly green?
The answer is a special pigment called chlorophyll, which lives inside these specialized cellular organelles called chloroplasts. Chlorophyll is the secret ingredient here. It acts kind of like a superhero suit for the plant. Now, sunlight actually contains every color of the rainbow. Chlorophyll is amazing at absorbing red and blue light waves to use for energy, but it is terrible at absorbing green light. It just bounces those green waves right back at us. So when you look at a lush green forest, you are literally just seeing the leftover rejected light that the plants didn't want for their superhero energy suits.
Part 4. The photosynthesis recipe. Let's head into the kitchen and check out the exact chemical recipe these chloroplasts are using. Just like baking, a plant needs very specific raw materials to make this work. There are 4 vital ingredients. First up, light energy streaming down from the sun. Second, water, absorbed by the roots and traveling up the plant's veins, which we call the xylem. Third is carbon dioxide, breathed in from the air through microscopic holes in the leaves, called stomata. And finally, the chlorophyll we just talked about, acting as the mixing bowl where all the magic happens. So, these ingredients come together in 2 main phases. First is the light-dependent reaction. The plant grabs sunlight and uses that pure energy to literally rip water molecules apart, breaking them down into hydrogen and oxygen. The plant doesn't actually need all that oxygen, so it just vents it into the air as waste. Then we hit phase 2, the dark phase, or the Calvin cycle. The plant takes the carbon dioxide it breathed in, mixes it with that leftover hydrogen from the water, and synthesizes glucose, which is a simple sugar. It is just an amazingly elegant piece of chemistry.
Part 5. Sugar, starch, and storage. Okay, once the plant factory makes this glucose sugar, it has to figure out what to do with it. Glucose is great for a quick burst of energy, but what about the long term?
Well, the plant actually faces a bit of a structural problem here. Glucose is highly soluble in water. It dissolves super easily. If a plant just kept all that soluble glucose lying around, it would completely mess up the water balance inside its cells. So the plant cleverly converts the glucose into an insoluble polymer called starch. By chaining those glucose molecules together into starch, it can safely pack the food away for long-term storage without wrecking its internal chemistry.
And plants store this starch in all sorts of different architectural areas, which, by the way, perfectly explains why we eat different parts of different veggies. When you eat a carrot, you're chomping on the plant's root storage. An apple, that's fruit storage. Cabbage is leaf storage, broccoli is flower storage, and a stalk of sugarcane is stem storage. Every single time you eat a vegetable, you're basically just raiding a plant's hard-earned starch pantry.
But how can scientists actually tell if a food is storing starch or just sugar? I mean, you can't always taste the difference. Taste is pretty unreliable. Instead, they use a really cool chemical test with an iodine indicator. Normally, iodine is a brown liquid, but starch is made of these long, linear chains called amylose that coil up, kind of like a microscopic tube. When you drop iodine onto starch, the iodine molecules get physically trapped inside the hollow core of that coil. When they get stuck, the whole complex turns a very distinct blue-black color. So drop some iodine on a potato, it turns blue-black, and boom, you've got visual proof it's packed with stored starch.
Part 6. The Circle of Life. Let's zoom way out from the microscopic plant cells in these chemical tests to see how this impacts the entire globe. Because without this process, none of us would be here.
This creates a really beautiful, totally interdependent cycle between plants and animals. It's basically the ultimate biological partnership. Plants are taking in the carbon dioxide that we exhale as waste, and in return, their waste product is the exact oxygen we desperately need to inhale to survive. We are breathing out what they need, and they are breathing out what we need.
But it goes way beyond just the breath in our lungs. This process is the literal foundation of the global ecosystem. Photosynthesis acts as a massive carbon sink. Our forests, grasslands, and ocean phytoplankton are constantly pulling huge amounts of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. That is absolutely critical for regulating global temperatures and fighting climate change. Plus, because plants are the autotrophs making the food, they sit right at the base of the food web. Every single herbivore and every carnivore that eats those herbivores runs entirely on the energy that plants initially stole from the sun.
Which brings us to one final, incredibly important thought. Knowing that every single bite of food you eat traces its energy back to a leaf, and every breath of oxygen you take is a direct gift from a microscopic green factory, what will you do to help protect the plants that sustain us all? It really changes the way you look at the trees outside your window, doesn't it? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I hope you never look at a green leaf the same way again.